Making news this week, the state government's unveiled the budget for 2014. We'll have a special report tonight.
And Liberal MP Rob Johnson talks about Troy Buswell in Howard Sattler's interview.
I think Troy Buswell's had so many chances and I think he's let people down.
This is the Evening News with Ivan Leung and Danielle Staniskov.
Good evening. First this week, WA Treasurer Mike Nahan announced his first state budget in his ministerial career. The government made tough financial decisions to keep the budget at a surplus as the state battles record debt.
Treasurer Mike Nahan has delivered his 2014-2015 budget, the first underneath his tenure, and amongst it is the sale of government assets including the TAB, which is currently run by Racing and Wagering WA. There are also rises in law and order, education, health and transport. However, there will also be hard hits to families who will suffer increases in taxes and tariffs, as well as the 10% rise in land tax.
Western Australia is experiencing a challenging fiscal environment at a time when the economy has passed the investment peak, leading to a production phase which will yield a record level of resource exports.
Despite recording $175 million of revenue in 2013-2014, the state still holds a total of $24.198 billion worth of debt. However, in a surprise, the public sector will continue to be the highest paid in the nation. The government also touched on the reduced GST share that the state currently reaps, down from 94 cents in 2008 to 38 cents just 5 years later. The much-expected sales of government assets will also go forward after the Treasurer announced that an advisory panel had been set up, a review undertaken, and recommendations made that stated that they no longer needed to be in state hands and would help curb the debt. Arguably, though, WA families will be the hardest hit as the state continues to fight spiralling debt. These changes will take effect from the 1st of July 2014 onwards. Furthermore, the government reaffirmed their core promises of delivering growth to law and order, education, health and transport, as well as the $902 million Perth Stadium. Regional areas will also find that the royalties for region plan has been capped at the already legislated $1 billion expenditure, as opposed to 25% surplus above royalties. WA opposition leader Mike McGowan labelled the budget as a horror budget.
It's a horror budget on the hip pocket. This will hurt every family, and it's all brought about because of this dysfunction and chaos at the heart of the government.
Kristian Dwyer, State Parliament.
After the state budget announcement, different social groups, unions, commercial and industry associations expressed their views towards it. Here is what they had to say.
Several of the unions believe the government is in disarray and that the increase in utility and transport prices presented at the budget today is unacceptable. They believe the increase will make it harder for low-paid citizens to keep up with an already high cost of living.
The increase to fees and charges, I think it's average of $324 for an ordinary family. That's going to affect ordinary hard-working Western Australians like our members.
It's very expensive to live in Perth. The costs of living are high, and this budget is only going to further increase those costs for working people.
Our view of this budget is that it is yet another lie in a long series of lies from the Barnett government. They would have us believe that public service expenditure is out of control and more services needs to be cut. This is clearly, blatantly not the case.
People who are on low incomes are already struggling to keep up with the cost of living. And the price rises announced today go above and beyond what was promised by this government to keep prices within the CPI.
Over the last year we've seen $180 million cut from school budgets, and now we've learned here today the state's plans to cut further, particularly from secondary schools.
This is a fairly disappointing day for people that are buying property or first home buyers. Last year land tax was increased by 12.5%, this year up another 10%.
After a turbulent wave of media coverage about his car crash incident, controversial politician Troy Buswell returned to politics this week. Liberal MP for Hillary's Rob Johnson is one of the politicians who criticised Mr Buswell. Chief reporter Howard Sattler spoke with him this week.
Rob Johnson, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Howard. Pleasure to be here.
The past week in politics has been dominated by questions about integrity, standards, ethics, all that, of state and federal governments who just happen to be currently Conservative, Liberal-led. Do you think the community has a right to be concerned about those issues?
Yes, I do. I do. And in relation to, obviously, the Troy Buswell issue, can I just say I want to separate mental illness from the actions of a person who's been drinking and driving a vehicle and then smashing that vehicle, a publicly owned vehicle. I have tremendous sympathy for anyone who genuinely is suffering a mental illness, but we must put that to one side because that appears to have come on after the events of the early hours of the morning of the 23rd of February.
Okay, but the Premier still supporting him. What do you think about that?
Well, the Premier is who I think he's, I think in this case, the jockey must have fallen off the horse a few times because he was going to ride him harder than black caviar. Well, I'm sorry. I think Troy Buswell's had so many chances and I think he's let people down. 3rd of February.
The brass snapping and the chest
well, I mean,
snipping, all that.
I have never publicly commented, Howard, on any of those unfortunate behaviour problems.
Behaviour, sure.
Oh, absolutely. I've never ever publicly commented on brass snapping, chair sniffing, squirrel gripping, drinking, driving and losing your licence, any of those areas at all. I have not done that because in those areas I think he's mainly damaged himself, but he's embarrassed other individuals and in some cases female individuals.
We were in the Liberal Party room this week when he returned to Parliament and he apparently reportedly received a round of hand clapping and applause. Is that right? So
well,
most of his colleagues support him.
Well, certainly there are a group of Liberal members of Parliament who I believe I question
it's the majority, isn't it?
I would suggest it probably is the majority, yes, but I would question their standards and the level of integrity that they insist on their ministers and their fellow members.
Thanks for joining us, Rob.
My pleasure.
To other stories, Australia's media giant Fairfax proposed to slash between 70 to 80 jobs from their newspaper branch. Positions affected are from its editorial, fashion and photography divisions. The Managing Director of Australian Publishing Media, Alan Williams, announced the proposed changes via email. Fairfax media staff in Sydney and Melbourne went on strike for 24 hours on Thursday, protesting against the cut. The MEAA denounced Fairfax's proposals and labelled the plan as an assault on quality journalism.
I mean, certainly to effectively gut 75% of your photography staff is I'd call that ruthless. And as I say, I'm not sure that outsourcing to an organisation like Getty Images is going to achieve what needs to be achieved in a major news organisation.
Have you ever wished that you can be a certain person so you can make the world a better place for everyone? This week, WAMN News launches the If I Am series, where we talk to many people in Western Australia about their ideas. We begin the series with Labor MP Frank Logan.
Hi, I'm Francis Logan. I'm the member for Cockburn, and I'd like to be the mission commander on the space station. Well, if as the mission commander on the space station, I'd like to be involved with breakthroughs in science and particularly medical science, molecular engineering. The lack of gravity apparently helps in understanding the molecule structure of our Earth, and if we can use that space station and the capacity that you get from the lack of gravity to have breakthroughs in particularly health matters, isn't that a great thing? I think that's a wonderful thing.
To World News. Festivities for the North American tree planting holiday Arbor Day were held in Canada this week. The city of Calgary planted trees at a local elementary school. Canadian correspondent Dustin reports.
We who plant a tree, plant a future of hope.
Arbor, meaning tree in Latin, is a necessity for humans and the world. Arbor Day is a well-timed opportunity for application for elementary school students, with Alberta's Green Day being May 8th. Students from Valleyview Elementary School were not only excited by their principal being a pianist, but also the planting of gigantic Arbor Day tree on their playground. The students learned more about trees during the Arbor Day ceremony through singing performances and guest speeches. More importantly, they acknowledged the meaning of Arbor Day tree.
We plant this tree of a symbol of this vibrant and wonderful learning community at Valley View School. This tree will be a symbol of hope. It will stand tall and proud in our community.
Arbor Day has a history of 108 years in Canada. It has a special meaning to Calgarians this year, as the worst flooding in Calgary's modern history last June destroyed green areas in mass along Bow River and High River. Dustin Lowe, WAM News.
And here's Cahli Samata with this week's top stories in science.
Thanks, Ivan and Danielle. New research is investigating whether emu oil can treat bowel diseases in order to prevent the development of bowel cancer. UWA's Dr. Susan Mashtaub has been awarded a $25,000 grant by Cancer Council WA towards this research. Dr. Mashtaub said that emu oil was used for thousands of years by our Indigenous ancestors to provide relief from pain. The research is due to be completed by early next year, with hopes that clinical trials won't be too far off. A new device is hoped to end the suffering of sleep apnea patients. CSIRO and dental company Aventis are able to print a mouthpiece using a 3D scanner to map a patient's mouth. The mouthpiece allows air to flow to the back of the throat, avoiding obstructions and preventing dangerous pauses in breath during sleep. An estimated 1 million Australians suffer from the disorder, which occurs when the air passage in the throat becomes blocked while sleeping. The device is expected to be available to patients next year. Goannas in the Kimberley are being trained to avoid eating poisonous cane toads. The method involves feeding the less toxic juvenile toads to wild goannas, which makes the goanna sick without killing it. This tactic is hoped to condition the goannas to avoid eating the more toxic adult toads. PhD candidate Georgia Ward-Fear is working with Indigenous rangers to track wild goannas back to their burrows by fitting them with radio tracking collars. The baby toad is then placed outside the burrow where most goannas will find and eat it. And that's science.
Thanks, Cahli, and that's the program for this week. You can log on to our website for the latest news.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.
Good night.